Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Well, the courts across the United States have basically been chiding the Trump administration. Many of them, Obama judges who are chiding the Trump administration simply because it is the Trump administration. One of the recent Supreme Court cases effectively suggested that the Census Bureau could not ask a question about whether people were in the country legally because they don't like Trump and think that he is a meanie. That was basically the opinion of Chief Justice Roberts and majority on the Supreme Court. And joining us on the line to discuss is Hans von Spakovsky. He's a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Hans, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Sure, Ben. Thanks for having me back.
So first of all, there's a new study out this week that looks at how many people across the United States approve of asking about citizenship on the U.S. Census. It had some surprising numbers. Maybe you can fill us in.
Sure. An overwhelming majority of Americans, and it doesn't matter if they're Republicans, Democrats, Independents, think that it's common sense to ask the citizenship question, and it includes a majority of Hispanic Americans, and those are that is the group that the plaintiffs in this case claimed would be scared to answer that question on the census.
Well, the fact that it is popular for people to ask about immigration status, it would suggest that Americans do have some sort of interest, and that goes to the heart of the question that was before the Supreme Court in the first place, and that broke a couple of weeks ago. And that question was whether there was a legitimate case to be made that the Trump administration should be able to ask the question absent animus. I'm shocked, frankly, that the Supreme Court decided the way that it did. What did you find to be the case that the Supreme Court was making there?
This was another case where Chief Justice John Roberts made a huge mistake, the same way he made a mistake in the Obamacare decision. Because, look, the Trump administration actually won some major points in the case, because the challengers here were claiming, first of all, that it was unconstitutional, if you can believe it, to ask a citizenship question. No, the Chief Justice said, no, it's perfectly constitutional, along with the conservative judges. Then the plaintiffs argued, well, yeah, maybe it's constitutional, but the Secretary of the Department of Commerce doesn't have the legal authority to put the citizenship question on there. Again, the Chief Justice disagreed and said, yeah, he's got the legal authority to do it. But then the Chief Justice crosses lines and with the four liberal justices say, yeah, but they didn't give a good enough reason to put the citizenship question on the census. And that was a serious error by the Chief Justice. The reason that the administration had already given was a perfectly rational reason, which is it's needed for enforcement of the Voting Rights Act. I can tell you that is absolutely correct, because I used to enforce the Voting Rights Act of the Justice Department. And this was just a big mistake by the Chief Justice. The case should have ended right there when they determined it was constitutional and the executive branch had the power to do that. That should have ended the case.
Well, the fact that it did not end the case does go to the questions of bias inside the judiciary. It seems as though there is a widespread bias at many district courts against President Trump. We've seen a bizarre number of decisions cutting against President Trump in the past few weeks. There was one earlier this week, I think came out 2 days ago, that suggested that President Trump could not block people on Twitter because Twitter was now a public forum, which is a bizarre decision. What should the administration, what should executive branches do in the future when faced with a judiciary that is basically trying to shut down the functioning of the executive branch at the district court level?
They need to replace as many of those judges as possible. I mean, there's not much else you can do, but unfortunately, because as you know, these are lifetime slots. Look, the big problem we have is that before he left office, Barack Obama had appointed and gotten confirmed about 40% of all the federal judges in the country, and they are without doubt the most left-wing radical judges that have ever sat on the bench. And we got another example of this just yesterday in the census case, when the Justice Department went to because what the Supreme Court is, they said, we're sending this back down to the lower court to a judge in New York, and we're going to give the Commerce Department another chance to come up with better reasons. So the Justice Department went to the judge in New York and said, hey, we're changing the lawyer team on this. We're going to have other Justice Department lawyers represent us. And the Judge Furman, an Obama appointee, said, oh, no, I won't let you do that. That is one of the most bizarre orders I've ever seen. The judge doesn't have any authority to tell the Justice Department it can't change its lawyers on a case. And I think that right there is clear evidence of the bias of this particular Obama appointee against the administration.
So given all of this, is it possible that in the future Congress is going to pass some sort of law that would stop the national injunctions that are being leveraged by lower courts? I understand in this case you have a Supreme Court decision that makes it different, obviously. But when you have these lower court decisions that are targeting an administration, do you think there should be legislation? I know I have about 10 seconds here. Do you think there should be legislation to curtail national injunctions?
Yes, absolutely. But it won't happen while the Democrats control the House, because all these injunctions have been in their favor.
Coming up, Hans, thanks so much for joining us. Coming up, Secretary